Jake had seen roadblocks before, but never like this. A line of armed men stretched across the highway, rifles glinting in the sun. His grip tightened on the wheel as his rig rumbled closer. They thought they had an easy target. But Jake wasn't just any trucker. And what was inside his trailer? That was something they should have never tried to take. They thought they had an easy score, but they had no idea who they were messing with. What would you do in Jake's shoes? Let us know in the comments. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more. The sun hung low over the endless stretch of highway, casting long shadows over the desert road. Jake had been behind the wheel for hours, his truck humming steadily beneath him. It was just another long haul, another quiet drive through the middle of nowhere, until he saw something up ahead. A roadblock. It didn't look official. A group of men stood in the middle of the highway, their silhouettes dark against the blazing sky. Jake's grip tightened on the wheel. Something felt off. These weren't cops, and they sure as hell weren't highway workers. As he slowed the rig, he noticed the glint of metal in their hands, rifles slung over shoulders, pistols resting on hips. Armed men. That was all Jake needed to see. He exhaled slowly, rolling to a stop about 50 yards from the group. The men didn't move. They just stood there, waiting, watching. Jake's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. Traffic. No help. He was alone. One of the men finally stepped forward. Broad shoulders, black leather vest, a thick beard covering most of his scarred face. He stopped just short of Jake's truck and rested a hand on his hip. Jake didn't get out. He didn't even open the window. He just stared down at the man from behind the glass. The bearded man smirked and rapped his knuckles against the door. "Evening, driver," he called out. His voice was casual, but the tension in the air was thick. "You're carrying a pretty valuable load, ain't ya?" Jake stayed silent. The man chuckled and leaned closer. "No need to be rude. See, we're in need of some donations, and your truck looks like it's got plenty to spare." Jake knew the game. He'd heard of hijackings like this before, groups of armed thugs blocking off remote highways, picking out vulnerable truckers, stealing their cargo. Hell, he had friends who'd been caught up in these kinds of ambushes. Jake wasn't planning to be one of them. Still, he played it cool. "Don't know what you're talking about," he said finally, his voice even. The bearded man grinned. "Oh, come on. No need to make this difficult. Just step out nice and slow, and we'll take it from here." Jake's fingers drummed against the steering wheel. His instincts screamed at him to move, to act, but he needed to wait just a little longer. Another man stepped forward, this one younger, twitchy, eyes darting around. "I say we just drag him out," he muttered. Jake glanced at the others. 7 men total, well armed, cocky. They thought they had him cornered. They were dead wrong. Jake let out a breath and slowly reached toward the dashboard, fingers brushing against something cold and heavy. The gang didn't know it yet, but they just picked the wrong trucker. The bearded man's smirk faded when Jake didn't move. His patience was wearing thin. "I said," he repeated, his voice sharpening, "step out of the truck, now." Jake remained still, his fingers tightening around the cold steel tucked beside his seat. His gut told him that the second he got out, things would go downhill fast. The younger guy, twitchy one, was already shifting his weight from foot to foot, gripping his rifle a little too tightly. He was eager, reckless. That was dangerous. The bearded leader sighed and nodded toward one of the others. A bald, muscle-bound thug with a shotgun stepped forward and tapped the barrel against the side of the truck. Clank, clank. "You deaf, old man?" the bald one growled. "Or just stupid?" Jake stared ahead, letting the tension hang thick in the air. A new voice broke the silent zone of the other men, still standing near the roadblock. "Just shoot the damn tires out. He ain't going nowhere." Jake's jaw clenched. That was a problem. The bearded leader nodded slightly, giving permission. "Do it." The bald man grinned, stepping back and raising the shotgun. Jake's pulse quickened. This was it. Boom. The shotgun blast echoed across the desert, shattering the stillness. Jake felt the truck lurch as the first tire exploded. Dust kicked up from the impact. A second shot. Another jolt. The front tires were gone. They weren't planning to let him drive away, not without a fight. The gang erupted in laughter, shaking their heads at the helpless trucker still sitting in his rig. The bearded leader leaned in again, voice dripping with false sympathy. "Guess you're not going anywhere now, huh?" Jake's grip on his weapon tightened beneath the dashboard. They thought they had him trapped. They thought this was over, but they had just made the last mistake of their lives. Jake took a slow breath, his pulse steady. The gang thought they had won. They thought he was just another scared trucker, another easy target on a lonely stretch of highway. They were dead wrong. His fingers curled around the grip of his shotgun, hidden just out of sight. His other hand hovered near the switch beneath his dashboard, a little surprise he had installed for situations just like this. The bearded leader smirked, nodding toward his men. "Pull him out." The moment one of them reached for the handle, Jake moved. Click. A deep mechanical clank echoed through the truck as steel-reinforced plates slid down over the windows, locking into place. At the same time, Jake slammed his boot against the dashboard switch. The air horn screamed, a deafening blast that sent the younger gang members stumbling back in surprise. Then he struck. Jake kicked open the driver's side door with brutal force, slamming it into the nearest thug and sending him sprawling. In the same motion, he swung the shotgun up, racking a shell with a familiar cha-ching. The gang froze. "Step away," Jake ordered, his voice like iron. The bearded leader's confidence wavered for the first time. He hadn't expected this. "You think that shotgun scares us?" Jake didn't answer. He just fired. The blast wasn't aimed to kill yet. It struck the dirt at their feet, sending up a spray of dust and rock. The message was clear. Jake adjusted his stance, ready. "I don't care what you're after. You picked the wrong damn truck." The gang hesitated, glancing at each other. Jake could see it in their eyes. For the first time tonight, they weren't so sure they were the ones in control. The gang had walked into this thinking they had full control. They thought Jake was just another trucker, an easy mark on a deserted highway. Now they were realizing just how badly they had miscalculated. Jake leveled his shotgun at the leader's chest, his finger resting just outside the trigger guard. He didn't need to fire again, not yet. The first blast had done its job. The gang was shaken, their bravado cracking like old pavement. "Drop your weapons," Jake commanded, his voice calm but unyielding. The bearded leader hesitated, his fingers twitching near the trigger of his rifle. He was weighing his options, but Jake could see it clear as day this man was used to intimidation, not real fights. "Do it," Jake repeated, stepping forward, "or you're going to find out real quick what happens when you push a man too far." One of the younger thugs, clearly rattled, took a step back and let his rifle slip from his grasp. It hit the ground with a dull thud. Another one followed his lead, dropping his gun and raising his hand slightly. But the leader? He clenched his jaw, his pride refusing to let him back down so easily. Jake sighed. "All right, have it your way." Before the man could react, Jake lashed out, slamming the butt of his shotgun into his stomach. The leader gasped, stumbling backward. He barely had time to recover before Jake's fist crashed into his jaw, sending him sprawling into the dirt. The gang watched in stunned silence. Jake loomed over the fallen man, shotgun still in hand. "Here's what's gonna happen. You and your boys are gonna walk away. You're gonna leave your guns right where they are, and you're gonna start thinking real hard about your life choices." The leader groaned, spitting blood onto the ground. His eyes flicked toward his men, looking for backup. But they weren't moving. They weren't about to risk ending up just like him. Jake tilted his head. "You think this is the first time someone's tried to rob me? You think you're the first wannabe outlaws to pull a stunt like this?" He chuckled, shaking his head. "Man, I've been doing this longer than you've been alive." The humiliation was sinking in now. The leader, once full of cocky arrogance, was now just another beaten thug lying in the dirt. Headlights flashed in the distance. More trucks. More drivers. Jake smirked. "And here's the thing about truckers, you mess with one of us. You mess with all of us." The leader's face paled as he realized what was happening. His crew was outnumbered, outgunned, and completely humiliated. "Now," Jake continued, stepping back and gesturing toward the dark highway, "get lost." The leader swallowed his pride and scrambled to his feet, his crew following suit. They stumbled into the darkness, their weapons abandoned in the dirt. Jake exhaled, watching them go. They wouldn't be coming back. As the last of the gang disappeared into the darkness, Jake took a deep breath, rolling his shoulders. The adrenaline was still pumping, but he could already feel it fading, leaving behind the familiar weight of exhaustion. He glanced at the other truckers who had shown up, their headlights illuminating the scene like a stage set for justice. One of the drivers, an older man with a thick mustache and a weathered leather jacket, stepped forward and clapped a hand on Jake's shoulder. "Damn good work, son," he muttered. "They won't be trying this again anytime soon." Jake nodded. "Let's hope not, but if they do, they'll find out the hard way again." A few of the truckers chuckled, but underneath their amusement was a shared understanding. Life on the road wasn't just about getting from one place to another. It was about looking out for each other, about standing firm when others tried to take what wasn't theirs. Jake kicked one of the abandoned rifles with the toe of his boot. He'd seen this kind of thing before, men who thought they could take shortcuts to power, who mistook kindness for weakness. But they always learned the same lesson in the end. You know, the older trucker continued, this ain't the first time some punks have tried to take advantage of a lone driver, but it's good to remind them that we ain't easy targets. Jake smirked. They figured that out the hard way. The other truckers started gathering up the gang's weapons, tossing them into the back of one of the rigs to turn into the authorities. Jake wasn't much for law enforcement, but he figured it'd send a message this road belonged to those who earned their way, not to those who tried to steal it. As the convoy prepared to move out, Jake took one last look at the empty road ahead. The night was quiet again, just the way he liked it. He climbed back into his truck, the familiar scent of diesel and leather wrapping around him like an old friend. He reached for the ignition, but before turning the key, he took a moment to reflect. How many times had people underestimated him? How many times had the world assumed truckers were just faceless men and women behind the wheel, easy marks in the middle of nowhere? They always forgot one thing. Truckers weren't just drivers, they were survivors, fighters, the backbone of the country. And some battles weren't fought in war zones or big cities. Some were fought right here, on the open road, where the only law was the one you were willing to enforce. Jake exhaled, gripping the steering wheel. He wasn't looking for trouble, never had been. But if it came looking for him, he'd be ready. Again. What about you? Have you ever been underestimated, only to prove everyone wrong? Share your story in the comments below. And if you love these kinds of real gritty stories from the road, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Stay safe out there and keep on trucking.